What is up, guys? I thought I would talk about kind of a weird topic today, I guess you could say, but it's something I've always had this thought in my mind about that it basically refers to time and the fact that time does not exist in a certain order. And I've always thought this throughout my life because people say, while you're doing something, time goes by faster, or while you're not doing anything, time goes by slower. And maybe time is not really there. Maybe it's just your perception of time. Because if I've got a 5 minute time limit on something, of course, it feels like that 5 minutes goes by faster than it normally does. And in your head, maybe it does. But I've got some examples of this now, actually, and I found one on the internet, and I cannot find the video that this was mentioned in. It was talking about a person who was knocked over by somebody dramatically larger than them in a hallway, and they hit their head, and I think they got like a stage one, stage two concussion somewhere in there. Well, the way the story was told was the guy got pushed over, hit his head, it hurt really bad, and he stood back up and walked away. He said that's what he thought happened. Okay, and this story, of course, it could be completely made up. I'm not gonna deny from the fact that this could be completely made up, but it made me think more about time again. So let's go on with this. So he walks up, finishes college, marries marries a girl, blah blah blah, has a kid, and then one day he just stood there in his living room. He said he looked at his lamp and the lamp looked weird, like almost like if a four-dimensional object existed. This lamp looked like a four-dimensional object, and he said he stood there for 2 weeks just staring at this lamp. What felt like 2 weeks. He said his wife left him, his kids left him, and all of a sudden he woke back up on the ground. One of the craziest stories I've ever heard of in my life. He said in his dream he lived 5 years while he was knocked out. In reality, he woke back up and everyone told him that he had been knocked out for 5 or 6 minutes. Kind of makes you think about, the perception of time. Is time really there? Uh, your mind. What does your mind perceive? Can you live a whole alternative life out in your mind? Because honestly, if your mind thinks something's there, if your mind thinks that you're touching something, it can feel like you're touching something. So it makes sense. I can kind of see where this came from. And of course, it could be completely fake. And also go back to comas. And I mean, a coma is probably a different thing from what I've researched about that. But there's people who wake up and they can like speak different languages, and people they can describe places that they've never been because they went there in their mind. Uh, of course, there's a lot of cases where people in comas can hear the people around them. But that first story, that that just think about it, okay? And people they might not understand what I'm saying here, but just say that uh, you work 8 hours, okay? So you work 8 hours. You have a clock that shows you 8 hours, but there's two different variables to this, and it could be that uh, time is just a product of your mind. I mean, that's probably the biggest one. I mean, the sun goes up and the sun goes down, but in reality, it could take 48 hours for the sun to go up and go down, and your mind translates that down into about a time frame of 12 hours the sun being up and 12 hours the sun being down. Let's say that. And maybe you sleep one night. This is another way to look at it, and this was maybe in a more controversial topic about how we're living in a computer simulation, and it all related back to two things in the computer simulation thing, but it's not important. I'll get back to that later. Anyway, when you go to sleep. Some days you feel like you got 8 hours of sleep. Some days you feel like you got 4 hours of sleep, and you actually slept 8 hours. And people can relate that to your body not correctly hitting the stages of sleep, and that's probably a more likely excuse. But still, uh, unless you do a sleep study on somebody every night, and actually there was a sleep study done on somebody every night, and they asked them, they put them in a room with no clocks, and they asked them, they said, how long do you feel like you slept last night? And they would get wildly different numbers. Wildly different numbers. Like, these people lived together in this house, no clocks, nothing with a clock on it. No way to tell the time. I think the blinds were shut. It probably would have been a very creepy sleeping experiment, but whatever. So they were giving wildly different times, and it did not correlate with how well they actually slept. And it made them wonder the whole perception of time thing. Okay, about the Matrix thing. Okay, the reason that some people think that we live in a matrix, and this can also relate to time not existing, is the only reason I'm throwing that out there. The reason some people think we live in a computer simulation is for the pure fact that data can disappear on a computer, which does not make sense. Say you send a file, the file either gets sent or it gets dropped. It doesn't get lost in the middle. And there's been some creepy stuff going on with something on the internet, like the FBI looking into it or whatever, because that they're sending files, and of course somebody could be intercepting them and not showing it, but it shows that the file didn't send, but the file's not there and the file's not at the other end. So where did the file drop off at? And it can't just drop off like that. Like, data does not just drop off like that. So that's probably the main reason people think we live in the Matrix. It could be something as simple as that. It can really be something as simple as that. And it also correlates back to the whole time thing, which the time thing can really just be your mind. I mean, your mind does so many things for you that people they can't comprehend. Your mind, there's the whole thing that they experiment with people on marijuana, and then they experiment with rats on cocaine, and the rat on cocaine thinks that time's going by way faster, and the rat on marijuana thinks time's going by way slower. Your mind can definitely control time in a certain way. So, I know this is one big jumbled up mess, and honestly, I don't have the answer. You can tell by me just talking about this, and apparently nobody has the answer. But I thought it'd be interesting to throw that out there. I appreciate you guys watching. Please subscribe, and I hope you stop back next time for my random rambling.